Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Plim Talks. Today, I have a very exciting guest. Her name is Heather Ventura, and she's actually one of the founders of Bridget Gates Press. So for once, we're actually taking a peek behind the secret press curtain. Ooh! So Heather, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And so Heather Ventura is the co-founder, as I mentioned, of the Bridget Gates Press, along with, on the website, it just said Clyde.
Mm-hmm. That's our son.
Son. Okay, so Clyde Ventura.
Yep.
Okay, as well as your partner, SD Ventura Vassallo.
Mm-hmm.
This is an indie press that was established in 2021. Beyond that, your hobbies include reading, obviously, discussing history, visiting libraries and bookshops, an obvious addiction to books.
Yeah, sadly.
Your favorite book is Frankenstein or Wuthering Heights.
Yeah.
Two very good selections. You love fairy tales, myths, poetry, the Gothic, history, romance, and dreams of owning a haunted family estate one day, which I assume you'll be there with your family, as well as your two mischievous cats.
Yes, probably.
Are they black cats?
They are, both of them.
Oh, yeah, I think we've discussed on Twitter that we're part of the Black Cat Club.
Yeah, club.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. So again, welcome and thank you for taking the time to let me interview you.
Thank you for having me on.
So let's start off. What drew you to the horror industry and why do you enjoy it so much?
Well, it started with my mother, and I know we blame our mothers for everything, but this one is definitely true. My mother read out loud to us every night, well into my teen years. And I have no memory of what we read when I was, a toddler, preschooler, but I know we read the real Grimm's fairy tales when I was in young parts of elementary school, and she read us everything, really, and not just horror. But I fell in love with fairy tales, and I never really grew out of it. And since my mother had read us the real Peralta, the real Grimms, I was always so surprised when people didn't know the horrific real fairy tales and knew the Disney fairy tales. So there was a disconnect between me and my peer group a lot. But it started with that. And then it started the very first time I ever read Frankenstein. She actually read it to us when I was a child. And that's where my love started. And so I've always been a horror fan. I've probably my biggest favorite, how's that for good language?
Heck
genre, is Gothic romance, because I love a good tortured love story in the middle of it all as well. But yeah, I have to say, absolutely, my mom. I love everything about it.
Your mom's tucking you in,
Yeah.
and she's opening up Frankenstein, and she's like, okay, little ones, it's time you learned about the hubris of man. So once upon a
time, there was a mad scientist who often had to take his airs.
He wasn't content with his lot and wanted to play a god. Let's see how it turned out for him.
Let's see how it went. Let's see what the role of electricity was in science at this day and age. So yeah, this was our big deal. This was our nighttime ritual. We would race through our showers and all pile onto the couch, and mom would sit in the middle and read. And we were horrible. It was me and my sister, and we were horrible children. We would beg her to read until her throat scratched, until she'd cough, until she could barely stay awake. We were ceaseless in our devouring of stories. So, but yeah, she read us everything, not just horror, but and she's such a narrator. She's got such a voice for a story that I just fell in love with everything we read, but the horror is the one that's always stuck with me. And I actually took a break from horror for a while, and I just recently kind of got back into it, though I never left fairy tales, but it destroyed me. The book It by Stephen King.
Yeah.
I was in middle school when I read it, and it's the only Stephen King book I have never finished. So I actually have no idea how it ends. Like I won't even let Steve talk about it.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
I
to
can't
be
even
to be fair, yeah, like I was gonna say, like at the age you were reading it,
yeah.
the female character of the same age isn't treated kindly.
No, she's not treated because she's kind of got a
Yeah.
rough row in the story
Yeah.
for sure. And um I suffer a lot from vivid nightmares and I'm a sleepwalker. So the idea of anything that can control your imagination is was terrifying to me at that age. And but it was brutal. Like I covered the mirrors in my room with material. I kept my curtains closed all the time, and I took my bed off off the frame so nothing could be under the bed. And I took the doors off my closet and off my bedroom door because I never wanted to be able to not know what was behind a door. I
Oh
mean, it
my
was,
God.
I'm telling
Thanks,
you, it
Stephen
was,
King.
yeah, it was, and my mom's like, I think we're gonna take a turn
It's time
into,
for the boxed car children.
right, we're gonna take a turn into maybe some historic romance,
Yeah.
like maybe we just keep it on the Rebecca level and
Yeah. Maybe
not
some
deep
Babysitters
dive.
Club.
Right, right. Like that's like let's keep it a little
Yeah,
less.
your mom let you try to read it. When she saw the reaction, all she could imagine was like how much she was gonna have to pay in therapy, and she was
Oh
like,
yeah.
"Time to
Oh yeah.
switch."
Yeah, absolutely. Because she was a big fan of read what you want, and she didn't really steer us for our personal reading or anything. She was like, no, read what you want to read. She no censorship. Her and my father both, no censorship. Read what you want. And so that backfired a little with me and it, as it turned out. So I took and that I was very young and I took like a 10-year break from horror before I picked up a book. And I think it wasn't what I would consider like the definition of horror. It was more like a true crime, but it was like true crime, it's horrifying. And
Yeah.
so that was kind of like my gateway back in.
Well then, so what draws you? Like, what is the perfect recipe for the movie or the book that's gonna like slap? That sticks with you.
I think for me, there's three things. It's world building, atmosphere, and angst. And I have found that I often picture a place, even if the author describes it vividly, I start to build what the world looks like in my own mind, which sometimes, as my husband informs me, does not always match what the book says. Like my imagine just kind of takes off with it. But those are my three big things is I love the atmosphere to be like another character or the place to be like another character in the book. And I think a book I've read recently that's gonna end up on my long-term favorite list, I'm almost sure, is Tim McGregor's Lure, um, where there's just something about the world building he does. Like I can picture every part of that town, and I almost felt like I knew all of the characters. And Catherine McCarthy, Immortelle, the angst of that mother throughout the whole story is tangible. And so like that's what I love in the stories is where like atmosphere, setting, the tension between a character's personal development or two characters, that kind of angsty, you know. I felt that in Rebecca too. The first time I read Rebecca, I was like, "Oh, yes, more of this, always this." So those are my big I love all sorts of books, but those are the ones that hook me immediately is that kind of storytelling.
Yeah, that's definitely fair. Then on the opposite side, specifically with the horror genre,
Mhm.
and I feel like a lot of writers who might be considering submitting to Bridget's Gate, this is
Mm.
something you should take note of. What is your biggest pet peeve when it comes to the horror genre?
So I'll tell you, I don't in the written word, I don't have a huge amount of pet peeve. In movies and film, I'm not a fan of jump scares.
Hmm.
I don't mind a jump scare once or twice, but I don't like it constantly. Um, and this is probably very unpopular to say, but I feel like it's the cheap seats of horror. It's
Mhm.
easy to scare someone with a jump scare, like a cat suddenly dropping on a dresser or whatever.
Yeah,
But I want to be
a
scared.
classic cat jump.
Right, the classic cat jump. And don't get me wrong, it's
What's in the closet? Wow.
yeah.
What
I
are
mean,
these cats doing everywhere?
and but I want to be scared because you've built the creep value like through the whole thing, like the atmosphere of the movie and the setting and the characters and that kind of thing. And so, but now listen, probably what will happen is a month from now I'll read something and I'll be like, this is my pet peeve in horror.
Yeah,
In
that's
horror
fair.
books, but I really don't have one in the books that I read. I don't mind. There are a lot of people who are like, I need time. I don't want a rush story. I'm not that person. I can read a story that goes from 0 to 90 quickly. And so, and I've got my suspension of disbelief triggers immediately upon
Mhm.
entering a story. Like, I have no problem suspending it. Unlike Clyde, who's like, I don't believe anything that's happening. And I'm like, I can't. And I'm like, I can't discuss books or movies with you. But like mine triggers fast and you really have to jar me to get me out of it. So I would think, but I wouldn't call it a pet peeve. It happens. Some people write that way, but I I don't know. I like it all. I like a slow burn. I like a fast turn. I'm a book junkie. I'm a book junkie
That's
bad.
fair.
Yeah.
IV it straight in.
Right. I mean, listen, if I could, it's outrageous. My to be read pile is 3 bookshelves now of books, and the books that I refuse to part with, I'm pretty sure are destroying our house.
I mean,
Like we
that's
have
fair.
so many bookshelves, and I'm like, this could be why we're losing ground. This
Hey,
could
I
be
mean, what you do is you start putting bookshelves in the middle of the room and create a maze.
right,
You know,
right,
the cats would love it. The
right,
husband would not, but he can't
right.
complain because he can't find his way out of the living room anymore.
I have a funny story about the built-in bookcase we have in our hallway. It's in a stairway. And so Um, and it's really built in, like it's not just attached to the wall. We tore the sheetrock out and built it between the studs and framed it in and then, put books on it. And which I don't listen, there are a lot of structural engineer reasons why you can't behave this way. And so I don't recommend that anybody else go out and do this unless you've really talked to somebody who can tell you that this particular wall in your house can maintain this kind of nonsense. Um, but one of the illustrators that we used and still use for our book covers, Elizabeth Leggett, she was showing me a picture of something in her house, and I forget what, but she had in her stairway what I thought was a built-in bookshelf. And so I went to Steve and I said, Elizabeth has a built-in bookshelf in her stairway. Because we're out of room. Like there's no other place to put bookshelves here. And he's like, okay. And so Clyde actually built it for us. He's kind of the structural engineer among us, um, who also has told me what the weight level is for that bookshelf. So never a hardback will live in it. But what's really funny is I showed Elizabeth a picture of it and she goes, oh, that's such a great idea. I wonder if we could do that. And I was like, you already have. I got the idea from you. And she's like, that's a quilt.
Oh, wow.
I was like, let's not mention that around a whole lot. I mean, Steve knows since then, but I mean, it was so funny when she told me, she's like, oh my gosh, that's a quilt. And I was like,
Oh.
oh, let's not,
Oh.
this bookshelf wasn't as easy as everyone in this house thought it was going to be. So let's not bring that up really fast. Like, let's
Yeah.
ease
Let's
into
bring that
it
up as a funny story like 5 years from
later.
now.
Yeah, like a year from now. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, listen, it's bad. I tell Steve all the time, we have to move because I need more bookshelves.
Just move into an old library.
Yeah, this is the dream,
See?
right? There are schools for sale everywhere, and I just told them, we have to watch asbestos and lead paint for sure, but you could have a whole wing of a school as a library,
Hmm.
truthfully. Yeah, I haven't been able to sell them yet.
Soon.
Yeah,
Soon you'll
one
break them
day.
down. It just takes time.
It just takes time. That's it.
So then
Absolutely.
let's talk about, because you obviously loved books enough to start your own press. So
Right.
Bridget's Gate Press. I'll link to it in the description below in case people want to check it out. I know you have an active submission for Gothic romance right now.
Right now. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
I
Until
haven't
the
been
end of the
creeping
month.
your webpage at all.
Yeah, not at all. Yeah, till the end it's open till the end of this month.
Okay, so there should still be time once this goes up,
Mhm.
if there's any writers watching this that have written a Gothic romance.
Yep.
So can you tell us a little bit more about the press and how it came to be?
So one of the things that Steve and I have always dreamed of doing, the classic one day, right? The one day dream was opening a publishing company. Because one of the things that has always struck us as odd is it's so hard for new writers to get their foot in the door, and traditional presses like you to have some writing background. Like at least 20 years ago, they very rarely would pick up somebody who had nothing, and agents want you to have experience and have made the rounds before they want to pick you up. And one of the things that just struck me as odd is everybody wants you to have experience and nobody wants to give you any.
Mhm.
And so that was one of the things. The other thing was when, and we had Clyde, I mean, really, as soon as we got married. Like the honeymoon period was very small. And one of the things that struck me was how difficult it was to find diverse children's books 22 years ago. And frankly, even before then, 30 years ago, because we had our godchildren live with us, back and forth quite a bit. And it was really hard to find inclusive books. And like you could find one or two, but you'd wait for a month at the library, for your turn to check it out. And so I just thought, I know there are diverse people writing books, I know there are. So why can't we find them? Why can't they get published? And so that was kind of the twofold drive behind why. And we're both book lovers. I mean, Steve spent his whole childhood like me with his head in a book. And as a matter of fact, when he got in really big trouble as a child, real trouble meant they took his book away. Because being grounded to his room was
Yeah,
like
that's
a
heaven.
pleasure. Right,
Yeah,
right.
that's where
It's
all
what
the
he,
books are.
right. That's right. That's where he could read quietly without being pestered by siblings or parents. So bring it. So, but yeah. So we always just thought that's going to be our one day dream. And when the pandemic happened, and so we were um locked in much longer than most people because of Steve's autoimmune disease.
Mhm.
So I was like, well, we have all of this free time now. Why can't one day be now? And I mean, we both kind of had the same thought around the same time. And we were like, okay, well, let's put together the business plan and the 5-year budget and let's do it. So that's what happened. And then it was born.
And how did you pick the name?
Oh, Bridget's Gate. Well, it was, I mean, we went through this big long name search, right? Trying to find a name that we could match to a website for branding reasons. And I had just had it one day, like I was all done name searching, like I'm just stupid. And and I said, here's the deal. To me, I wanted to have a gate because to me, I wanted to have a gate always open. Like our gates are always open. Just come on in. And I wanted to have something to do with either my Irish or Scottish family because I had a great grandmother who was a librarian. And I think the love of books that filtered down in my family line probably originated with her. And she and two of her sisters were put on a ship and sent to America during the potato famine. And the rest of
Mm.
her family stayed behind. They could only afford to save three of them. And um, I mean, I think that, so I was just thinking about that and I happened to look at the calendar and it was Imbolc, which is Bridget's Day. Um,
Oh,
and I was like, oh, sure. because Bridget, before she became a Catholic saint, was the Irish goddess of the forge, poetry, hearth fire. And I was like, sure, okay. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
could
can
dig
do
it.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can do it. And the name wasn't taken. So I was like, okay, then that's the
It,
winner.
it's kind of funny how that story came about from like one concept and then kind of just an idea you wanted to incorporate from your family, and it just ended up like this
Right.
perfect name. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was just luck. It was just luck. And I wanted something broad because, one day I want to branch out into more than just horror.
Yeah. So you don't want
And
something like Stabby McStab Press.
right,
Yeah.
right. Like as much as I would have loved to have like Ravensgate Press, I was like, well, does that really attract everyone? Maybe it does. It does
Yeah.
me, but I'm also
I mean,
not,
yeah,
yeah,
Ravens
odd.
are awesome. So
Right, right. Can't lose.
yeah. So then leading off with that, what do you hope to achieve with the press?
Well, I think our main goal is to help authors who have never published their own novella or collection or novel, to help writers who are like I call it I call it the 5-year plan, though maybe it's really taken them 15 to write 5
Mhm.
works, but authors who are newer, who are trying to find their footing, find their voice, and hope to amplify them enough that they can be picked up, assuming they want an agent, assuming they
Mhm.
want, to attract the attention of a movie deal or a big publisher, to help amplify them so they can get their foot in the door and get started. And so I don't mind at all publishing authors who've been publishing for 20 years, but I think our main focus is trying to give voice to the people who are struggling to get in, who I think have a really good story to tell. I mean, not everybody can write. I don't consider myself a writer, but I'm an avid reader and I know what I'm looking for, and I want to publish more of what I want to read. You know, I I want I just want the kids who are teenagers to be able to go into any library and find an author who looks like them, who's neurodivergent like them, who has the same ideology or lifestyle choice or whatever, sexual orientation, all of it. I want everybody to be like, oh, yeah, there's 30 books with there's 30 books with transgender characters, easy to find, not a
Mhm.
librarian who's hunting and pecking to try to find the one book to see if they can interlibrary loan it. And listen, I get that I live in Kansas, so like not
Yeah.
everybody has small library systems, but you know, that's what I want because I know the writers are out there. I know the stories are out there, and I know that there are people who want them. So
Mhm.
that's the big goal. The big goal is try to help authors just get out there and get circulated so they can do whatever. I don't know that every author's dream is to stop their day job and only write, but if it is, I want to be able to try to help somebody get through that gate.
Mhm. No, that's amazing. Then I know, so this started last year in the pandemic. So you're
Hmm.
about a year old, depending on which month you started in.
Right, right.
Congrats.
Thank you. Thank you. Yep. Thank
But
you.
obviously, owning any kind of a small business is going to have its challenges and its obstacles.
Yeah.
So, what have you come up against opening up your own family press? Like, what have been some obstacles you've seen?
So I think the biggest one for us is when Steve got COVID, and after HWA convention, Steve came home with it. And unlike some people who shake it in a week or 10
Yeah,
days,
thanks, StokerCon. Just
yeah,
just kidding, don't cancel us,
right, right.
StokerCon. It was a fun
I do
souvenir.
not hold them responsible for anything that happened. I mean,
They're
we're
like, here's
living,
your goodie bag and here's your COVID.
yeah. I mean, here's the thing. When you're in pandemic, when you're in a pandemic, that's the risk you take, right? And so we decided to do it, and I got lucky and he did not. And but he was sick for 12 weeks before he could really work for any substantial amount of time without needing to take a break
Mhm.
or a nap. And he still struggles with some fog and memory. And I mean, we've gone to using, I homeschooled the kids, and I had a whiteboard system. I called it a toggle system, where we just move things up along the whiteboard and the bulletin board. And we've gone back to using that to help him track um,
Mm.
projects. And the nice thing is since that was such a ingrained part of our just survival for 18 years, that it's a system that makes sense to him, and we've been able to really put it back in place and utilize it. But just having me, and I'm no editor, guys. I mean, I'm not. If you ever read my tweets or my emails, and I mean, sometimes there are periods, sometimes there aren't, sometimes there are apostrophes, sometimes there aren't, sometimes I leave whole words out. Um, so we had to lean into hiring people to help edit the some of the works we had in place, and proofread and format. And so I could still do my part of the marketing and sales and meeting with bookstores and that kind of thing.
Mhm.
But it was rough. It's rough when you have a family business, when, one third of you goes down. Um, so, but I mean, it's just the truth of it. And the one thing we did, because we budgeted out for 5 years, and then I budgeted out an emergency slush fund, because I work in another family business, so I know what it looks like if you lose part of your workforce. So we had to dig into that slush fund pretty hard to
Yeah.
get, but that's what it's there for. So, I mean, we were lucky that I'd had these experiences before. I think what made it hard is we thought every week he got a little bit better, and then like 5 or 7 days later, he'd take a turn for the worse again for 3 or 4 days. So like we always thought we were almost out of it, and then we would be right back into
Yeah.
him not being able to work, or missing like 4 days in a row. So it was difficult to predict how long he would be out, and so what projects I needed to hire people for and that kind of stuff. But I mean, we made it through to the other side, and frankly, I don't know that we'll go back. We've had such great experiences with the people we've contracted with, that we decided to stick with them and publish, more books next year than we had
That's
originally.
awesome.
Yeah. So because now we've got Steve back and we have them, and I think we can do it. I'm not saying I'll be sane at the end of it, but I think we
Yeah.
can do
I
it.
mean,
Yeah.
you don't have to be.
Right, right.
It's better if you're just slightly kooky when you get that haunted estate, because then the ghost really
That's
can't
right.
affect you that much at that
I want to
point.
have a reputation in town. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And so I think it's going to be important that I'm not completely hinged by the
I
time we
feel
get
like
to that
you
place.
have a witch hat, right,
Oh
already? 'Cause
yeah.
I know those are vogue now. I
Yeah.
saw somebody out at the farmer's market with a red one, and I was like, oh, I need one.
Everyone should have a witch's hat.
Yeah,
Everyone. Yeah.
agreed. So then, difficulties aside, what has been your favorite part of the press?
Oh, I think my favorite part is reading submissions. It really is. And even books we don't sign, I still really enjoy reading the first handful of chapters. And I think that, no, really, that's it. That's absolutely my favorite part. I think Steve's favorite part is when a book hits print day,
Yeah.
and goes live, and, we can tangibly have books in people's hands. But mine starts in the very beginning, when they first submit it. The only fight Steve and I ever had actually was with the very first standalone book, which is Katie Marie's A Man in Winter. Steve wanted to edit a significant portion of one of the chapters, and I cried because I
Oh,
didn't want him to touch it. I loved the
yeah.
story as it was. And he talked to the author, and she doesn't know it probably, but she sided with him. And it did make it a better story. I mean, like Steve does have an editor's eye. Like I shouldn't fuss at him because I don't, but and I mean, I think it's been great for the book, but that's when I was like, okay, you know what? You're right.
Yeah.
I'm gonna fall in love with the story and I'm gonna trust that you're gonna do the right thing with the story after that. Like
Yeah.
that's fine. I'm gonna trust you and the author to have the right vision. But I was like, I fell in love with the story. Don't rework any part of it.
Yeah.
But that's it's hands down my favorite part. That and being able to tell people they've been accepted to an anthology. That's
But
my
then
favorite part
does that
too.
make it extra hard when you have to send out rejections?
Oh, listen,
Do you just make your son do it? Or like I
no,
handle the acceptances, you do the rejection.
I'd like to, but he does the books and the IT stuff. He has a life outside of the press. Sadly. But no, Steve does them.
Hmm.
And every once in a while I help because he sets a deadline, the self-imposed deadlines that he wants
Mhm.
to notify everybody with. And he's like, listen, you have to help now. Like you're gonna have to do these 50. But I thought that it would be okay. I thought I'd be okay with it, but in fact, I am not. And the first time we had to do it, I actually locked myself in the bathroom and refused to came out and wailed like a banshee for an hour until my throat hurt because I didn't want to. I
Yeah,
was
it's
like,
hard.
I don't want to do it. Just let's publish 3 books. Like
Just keep
that's
publishing, never stop.
yeah, like that's to me, I mean, that's fine. You don't want to have an 800 author anthology? That's fine. Then let's have 4 anthologies. I mean, like, forget it. I'm not doing this. And so, and listen, I can be a real handful. I'm
That's what
willing
makes
to
you a
admit that.
great person though.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I tell Steve.
Yeah.
I'm a delight. I'm an effing delight.
I mean, when I met you at Stoker, I thought you were delightful.
See,
I bugged
I
you all the time. I was like haunting
I
you.
loved meeting everybody at Stoker, and I gotta tell you, one of my favorite parts of Stoker is watching you shtick with a guy I never knew, and I'm not sure you did either. And I was like, she's delightful. But yeah, so I don't know, but I do love that, and I love telling people yes and no. I hate rejecting, and truthfully, there have only been in all the anthologies we've done so far. Do you like how I said all like we do 100 a year?
Yeah.
Um,
You're getting up there.
yeah, I've only had like 5 stories where I was like, no,
Yeah.
no. But all the rest of them, I'm like, okay, right, I know we have to make choices, but this is a really good story and I
Yeah.
wanted it. And so, listen, Steve will tell you, in his opinion, the Musings of the Muses is too long and there are too many contributors. And I will tell you that it is not long enough. And, and we included poetry in that one. And so we had, I think, 60 or 65 poets and authors, but it's easy to get that many when you include poetry. If you really
Mhm.
want to do, you know, 20 or 30 stories and 20 or 30 poems, you get there fast.
Mhm.
So I just blame the format, frankly. And Steve, to punish me, made me help him do contracts one time.
Oh,
And
what fun.
yeah, so I'd like to say lesson learned, but Daughter of Sarpedon, which is
Fight the
uh,
system.
right, Daughters of Sarpedon, which is coming out at the end of this month. I knock on all the wood. Um, I think it's got 40 or 45, so I didn't really learn my lesson. I just learned it a little.
Yeah, I think so. I'm obviously on the author side. I see, authors chatting, and like sometimes people will get very upset at a rejection. And I've been an editor like once before for the
Hmm.
House from the Dark Ages, and it is
Yeah,
hard sending rejections. And I
yeah,
don't like sometimes I think the authors can forget that beyond the rejection is somebody who has to be doing the rejection, and that's no fun. Like no one
right.
wants to be the person who's crushing somebody's
That's right.
dreams.
Crushing
Like
dreams. Right. Like that's
yeah,
how I feel. I'm like,
nobody wants to be the villain.
and I tell Steve, I say, listen, how can we be a press that wants to make people's dreams come true and then also be dream crushers? Like that
Yeah,
seems like I don't know. That seems horrible. That
I
seems like
guess
we're at
you just have
odds.
to imagine Bridget's Gate is like the that tunnel that Atreyu has to go through, and there's like the laser sphinxes. Not everyone's gonna make it through.
Not everybody's
No.
gonna make it. Not everybody's gonna make it. The sad truth. And it is horrible because when you get so many submissions, they start to become very impersonal.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and you have to just to survive. And so, because Steve and I also have day jobs. So, like, you come home, you send rejections for 2 hours, and you're like, I've got to take a break. Like, let's
Yeah.
eat dinner, let's watch a comedy, let's do something light, you know. So, but you could, if you do it that way, you may be doing rejections for 4 days, which is like walking through hell for 4 days.
Mhm.
But listen, it's horrible. And I think there's nothing worse than I'd love to write a personal, like what I loved best about your story at the end of the rejection sentence.
But that
So
would take
authors,
so much longer.
it really
Yeah.
does. It really does.
How
And
many
so,
submissions did you get on average for, let's say, the last anthology?
well, for Blood in the Soil, I think we sat between 150 and 200. We did that one really fast with a really short window,
Hmm.
because we had picked up the idea from a press that had closed.
That
And
was the Silver
yeah,
Shamrock incident of
yeah. And
2022.
I mean, really, truly, um, I think Kenneth W. Kane is a phenomenal editor. Like, we read a lot of the stuff that he's edited in the past. And so just the idea of an editor being out what they had planned and scheduled for, and
Mhm.
the authors who were already writing stories, I just said, well, let's just do it. We'll make it a short run. We'll put it out there, and hopefully we won't get an overload of stories, because we were also picking up some books that had, you know, authors that were looking for new homes. And I'm like, so let's keep it short and sweet. You know, let's get Ken back in the saddle, and let's, you know,
Literally, because it was
yeah,
a Western
literally.
horror.
Yeah. And let's get the book out there. And I but Medusa had 900
Ooh,
submissions.
that's a
And
lot.
so, or maybe it was, I forget, I get them mixed up, but Medusa had somewhere between 6 and 900, and then Dangerous Waters had between 8, I think like 875 and 950 when it was all done.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, this is like monstrous. Like, there's
And
no way if
how
you're going to
many
pick.
people do you have reading?
Oh, okay. So Musings was the first time we pulled in a reader, because I was like, this will take us 4 months to read. Like,
Mhm.
this is insane. And so we reached out to 2 people that we knew to ask if they would slush with us. And so they did, thankfully. And we survived. And so I did it again with the Westerns, and we did it again with um, Dangerous. And I haven't yet for the romance anthology, the Gothic romance anthology. We'll see how many submissions I really get in the end. So
Mhm.
far, I've been able to keep up with them. So I haven't tagged anybody in, but we'll see. We'll see if that remains to be true. But I'm glad we did with Dangerous, because that was a show. I mean, frankly, it was Steve and I usually also slush read to help editors. And so, but Steve was out. Like, Steve didn't always have the attention span to read even a short story. So it was me and 2 slushers and the editor. And even then, I feel like we were under the gun all the time,
Mhm.
um, to try to get stuff read. And I think eventually we'll probably end up having to get more slush readers, but it's hard because I always want a slush reader that understands like what the editor wants. And
Mhm.
that's easier when I'm the editor, because I can articulate what I'm looking for. And there's one slush reader in particular that we've used where he and I have the same feelings about stories. And like, he and I, when we rate a story and we make notes about the storyline and what really worked or what needs, editing. They're very similar, our comments are. And so, I'm very comfortable using him, especially for things that I edit, because I know that he and I enjoy the same type, are looking for the same type of thing in a story.
Mhm.
But it's hard because not every editor looks for the same type of stories I look for. And so I really have to watch myself when I'm slush reading for an editor, that I'm choosing a story they want instead of one I would want if I
Mhm.
was editing. And so that was a learning curve for me the first time we did it, where I was like, oh, hold on, I'm slush reading for you. Let me think about what you want again. So because we always have the editors choose like 3 stories that demonstrate the type of story they're interested in,
That's
to
fair.
have the slush readers read before they get started, so they can be like, okay, this is the story we're looking at. This is the type of story we're looking for, or the voice we're looking for.
Mhm.
So it's interesting. It's
So
interesting.
I guess it's important for like authors to
Uh-huh.
realize as they send submissions in,
Yep.
like rejections, like especially like now that you've spoken your side of things, like they're not personal, and usually it's really
Right.
hard to do. But
Right.
there are sometimes 900 stories in the running and you can't
Right.
accept them all. That would be impossible.
Right. And it's
So
just so, like each anthology has a budget, and
mhm,
we want to pay 8 cents a word, which means, we have to decide how many words we can really afford when it's all said and done. And so you do have to make a cap, like, okay, listen, this is their word count. So we've got to stick with it, or it becomes a book that blows budget and becomes a monster. So,
mhm.
but it is, and I feel bad because, that's a lot of submissions. And I feel like maybe authors feel dejected by hearing there's like 900 submissions, because they're like, oh, what's the
Yeah.
point of this market?
Hey,
But
there's always a chance.
right, that's the thing, is there's always a chance. Always keep submitting, because you never know. Just because I didn't like it doesn't mean somebody else isn't going to 3 months from now. Or just
Mhm.
because it didn't fit with the flow of my anthology doesn't mean it isn't the perfect fit for an anthology next year. So, I mean, like, that's the thing, is that you just got to keep submitting no matter how bad the odds are, because you never know when you're going to get picked.
Then, on a similar note, since you've done several sides of accepting
Hmm.
or in the process of accepting stories, like you've worked as a slush reader for other editors working for
Hmm.
Bridget's Press, and you've been the editor of an anthology that does the final acceptances or
Hmm.
rejections. What tips would you give writers
I
like
think,
towards getting acceptances, like in
right.
general or with Bridget's Press in
I
particular?
think, and I can't speak for every single press, but I think that a lot of editors would say similar things to what I'm about to say, and that is, write what you want to read, because you sell your own story when you're passionate about what you're writing. And listen, don't get me wrong. Syntax, grammar, language choices, metaphor, world building, all of these things are important. But if you're writing a story that you're not really in love with, or about a topic that you're just, and I also understand you got to pay the rent, right? So Elizabeth and I discuss all the time, there's rent work and artwork. And so I get it, but just really, if you love the story, I think you'll eventually find a home for it. It may not be the submission you're inspired by, but I think you'll eventually find a home for it, because I think the passion for the work shows through
Mm-hmm.
in different ways for different authors. But I feel like, I just feel like it does. And I think that's the key. And I know people are going to tell me maybe it's too simplistic, and maybe it is. But that's my advice, is I feel like sometimes I pick up a story and I can feel somebody's blood and sweat in it, like it's got an imprint. And I just feel like that attracts not only your editor or your publisher or an agent, but it also attracts a reader.
Mm-hmm.
It's what keeps the readers coming. And I believe firmly that there are readers like I am, who dream a story into being. Like we put it, like we so desperately want to read a story like this, and we just wish it all the time. And eventually a writer is inspired in some way to write that story, so you'll find your readers. It just may take a while. And truthfully, there may only be 100 of us, but I think it's still worth writing.
Then let's see. So in the anthologies you've done, it's been a mix of blind submissions or not blind submissions. In particular, the submission call for Dangerous Waters, Deadly Women of the Sea was a blind submission process.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to discuss that because I think the industry standard is a non-blind submission process.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess a couple part question. One, why did you decide to do a blind submission for this anthology?
Mm-hmm.
And what advantages or disadvantages did you think it had over non-blind submissions?
Sure. So we let the editors choose if they want to do blind submissions versus non-blind submissions. So with Dangerous Waters, that was the editor's choice to do blind submission. And I think the reason I hear most from people who want to do blind submissions is they don't want to be swayed by a person's name, like somebody they've read and recognize and love. They want to fall in love with just the story, not the author. The submissions where Steve or I or both of us have been the editor, we don't do blind submissions. And I think for me, and I can't speak to everybody, there are definitely, listen, just like every reader, I have author frenzy, right? There's an author who puts out a book, I'm going to buy it. And I'm probably going to buy it maybe without even reading the description. Like, I know I like the author, I know I want it, I know I'll enjoy it. I've been burned a couple times by this sometimes.
That's
But
fair.
right, but I'd say overall, mostly it's a good plan because it's the author that sells the book, right? The reason you go back to the bookstore to buy a book is because you love that author, not because you love that press, and maybe not even because you loved that cover or the cover artist or the editor or the proofreader. It's the author. And so though I think knowing the author names maybe has a disadvantage because if it's one you like, you're like, oh, this is going to be a good one, or you're happy to see them. But I think one of the keys to trying to include diversity is knowing who the author is. And it's a double-edged sword, right? Because we got some criticism in the past for, I don't want to say this person said we were too inclusive because that's not the exact words that were used, but the implication is we chose diversity over talent. And clearly I didn't agree. But I don't think you have to choose. I don't think that's a choice you have to make. I think there are plenty of talented diverse voices out in the world. So you don't have to choose, a piece that doesn't fit just to make it fit. But I mean, I'm aware that there's criticism on both sides, and I'll take my lumps, I mean, I think it's one of the reasons why we wanted to start the press. It's one of the biggest frustrations I had raising children with not enough diverse authors. And it's one of the things that's important to us. So I think it will always be something that we always do an anthology where it's always open call and no blind submissions. So
like, obviously I can see the benefits of both, like having a blind submission and like, just picking the story based on its own merit. But I can also see the other side of things, whereas like maybe if you have two stories set in Asia, you'd prefer the one written by the
right by somebody who's got the history
Asia, and not somebody from a Caucasian background who's kind of just trying to take that. Like, I definitely see that because there is an authenticity in getting a story from the source, I guess. I don't know if the right term is no,
but I do feel like that's true. Like, I do feel like that's true. And I do feel like a lot of times there are plenty of there are plenty of authors who don't come from that culture or don't have that cultural background or ancestry, and you can still write a really good story
Hmm.
for sure. But I also, I mean, like, I think men can write good women, that are convincible, and women can write good men that are, you convince me, and so I think it's absolutely possible to do, but I do think if my goal is to choose to help publish someone who's trying to get their foot in the door and it's their ancestry, it's their story, it's their truth, then I want to try to help them get it out in the world. And listen, we're going to get it wrong. We've gotten it wrong in the past. We're young. We're going to continue to get it wrong, I
I mean,
think.
you're only a year old.
Oh, right, right. But I believe firmly in what was the name of that book by Abby? Was it Wambach, the soccer player who wrote "Failure
Um,
Means You're in the Game"?
okay.
And so I'm pretty sure it was called. Oh, well, I don't know if I still have it here, but I'm pretty sure it was called Wolfpack or something like Wolfpack in the title. But she's got like, I don't know, 9 or 10 rules, and one of them is failure means you're finally in the game. So that's what I tell myself every time I feel like we get it wrong somehow. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, failure means we're in the game. We're in the game. But yeah, so I mean, I don't think we're there yet. I don't think we've nailed, you know, diversity and lifting up only diverse voices at all. But I think we've got our feet in the pool, you know.
Yeah.
We'll just see how it goes.
And I know that's one big part of Bridget's Gates Press is the fact that you do want to uplift
Right.
voices that may in the past have been, if not straight out silenced, but not
Right.
exactly supported either.
Right. Right.
I mean, in the 80s, the horror genre, like the 60s, 70s, and 80s,
Oh
the
yeah.
horror genre was very much the white man's game.
Right, right.
So,
And yeah, and I listen, go to any bookstore, and I don't want to say all bookstores because my indie bookstore, it does a fantastic job of having diverse
I
shelves.
feel like
But
I already know what you're going to say and I'm ready for
right.
it.
But go to any bookstore, it's mostly men who dominate
Yeah.
the shelves still, even though there are so many women writing in
Hmm.
horror. I mean, so many. And you still can't always find them. They still
Yeah.
don't get shelf space, or promo space. And so it's still, listen, like I tell people in my other job, it's still 80 cents on the dollar.
Hmm.
We're still not done, but it's true. I think more women are being published. I think more women are also willing to self-publish and have figured out how to make
Hmm.
that work and get their name out there. Um, and I think that that's all a great thing. And same thing with any person of color, and especially Indigenous people. I mean, and I live here in Kansas, which, we have our own bloody relationship with the people who were originally here. And even the bookstores that have like what I like to call the Kansas shelf, boy, we're sure missing anybody who isn't white
Yeah.
from that shelf. And I'm like, guys, come on now. I mean, we're just straight north of Oklahoma, and there are indigenous people aplenty that live in this state and the surrounding states. There's really no reason for the Kansas shelf to not have one indigenous author. That's the
Hmm.
craziest thing I've ever seen. Um, but it's just stuff like that, you know.
Well, I for one appreciate what you're
Well,
doing.
thank
I
you.
mean, yeah, I mean, it does matter that presses are aware of that issue and trying to make efforts towards at least evening the playing field
Right,
max,
right.
if
Or
not
trying
trying to
to.
uplift,
Yeah.
you
I mean,
know?
and it is hard, and because here's the thing. I think we do a fairly good job of when somebody submits. And we've had a few authors who English isn't their first language who we've done extra editing with, you know, um, to help the manuscript, which I think has worked wonderfully for us. I know this isn't always the case for other people, but also the second half is attracting the authors, right? So I think we do an okay job of publishing who submits most of the time. But I think we have to do better at figuring out how to attract them to submission calls. And we will. I
So
mean, it's a learning
you heard it
curve.
here live, folks.
Yeah.
Submit to Bridget's Gate Press.
Oh no.
Especially if you're an underrepresented voice. Get
Right.
it.
Right.
They
Right. We're
pay 8 cents
trying.
a word. Get it.
Right. We're trying, man. We're trying.
Yeah.
We're trying.
So then what do you and Bridget's Gate Press have in the works now?
Well, we've got several single author stories coming up in the next year. And
Do you want to name drop some of them?
you know what? I don't think I do yet. I
Oh,
will name drop.
secrets.
Yeah, I do have a lot of secrets. I will name drop a couple. Um, no, you know what? I'm not going to name drop anybody.
Oh my God, I thought I was special.
All right, I know,
Heather, give
but
me
I
the
know,
inside
isn't it
scoop.
horrible? Isn't it horrible?
Dear diary, Heather was mean to me
I
today.
mean, Heather was mean and withheld all information. And so, but we do listen. We have a lot of stand-alone. We have a couple collections, um, and we have a couple anthologies in the works for next year that I'm really excited about. And I'm I'm remiss to even say out loud that I've pretty much filled 2023 and 2024.
Ooh,
And so, like, we were just talking to an author the other day, and I was like, okay, but make sure everybody understands we're talking about 2025 now.
that's fair.
And, because 2023 is kind of what I call the blitz year. And, um, and then 2024, we're going to take it a little slower. And we'll see what 2025 brings,
Got it.
whether we do another blitz year or slow and steady. So, but I want to be able to go to more conventions in 2024, I think. So I want to keep the convention months free of Steve and I having any responsibilities
That's
so we
fair.
can travel more. So, because I don't know that we'll be traveling a whole lot next year because somebody packed this schedule tight.
There we go.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so we're running a bit long, so I'm gonna
Okay.
hit you with my very tough, serious finisher question
Okay.
that is unknown to you. Take a
Okay.
deep breath. What is your favorite food and why is it mac and cheese? I scared you there for a second.
Well, I'm a Kansas girl, and it's going to show because my favorite food is steak.
Oh, steak and the patates.
I don't even
Yeah.
need a potato. I'm a steak girl all the way.
But do you like mac and cheese?
I do like mac and cheese.
Okay,
I
good.
can't, my body does not approve of mac and
Oh,
cheese,
that's
but
fair.
my tongue does.
Okay.
Yeah, it just isn't, it's odds with the rest of me. But yeah, listen, back in the day when I didn't mind torturing myself all night long, I'd go for a good bowl of mac and cheese, especially if you put things like bacon and onions in it
That's fair.
and like 3 different kinds of cheese. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's fair. And
Yeah.
so Canada is obsessed with craft dinner.
Craft dinner?
Yes, we call it craft dinner. So
It's
it's like,
like the box food craft?
yes. It's like a
Okay.
staple.
Okay.
And so I grew up on it. And I didn't know this wasn't I didn't know this was a big Canadian thing, but it's big in Canada to put ketchup on it.
Really?
Yeah. See, a lot of people have had that reaction you just had, or something like more visceral.
Right, something a
And I
little more
just,
like, ugh. Yeah.
yeah, but like it's delicious.
Ketchup
And
on
like,
macaroni and cheese.
so I asked this question. I'm like 4 interviews in and I haven't explained this yet. I wrote a futuristic sci-fi horror story set around the theme of hunger.
Mhm.
And I didn't realize until I did a reading for it, and somebody called me out in the question, the Q&A, about the large amount of detail I put into describing mac and cheese. And it was then that I realized that I do write horror, but I write a lot of food porn as well in my stories. And he was just like, why are you writing? Like, why was there such a long passage on mac and cheese? And I was like, I
That's
like my
his,
mac and cheese.
that's hysterical. My husband, when he, listen, when you've got a lot of kids eating at your house, there's a lot of craft here.
Yeah.
Any kind of boxed meal, frankly. I call it the
Hamburger
30.
Helper was big in the 90s.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I could never get myself involved in Hamburger Helper, but I did put down Kraft macaroni and cheese
Mhm.
on a bad night. And
But no ketchup smile, apparently.
no ketchup smile, but my husband would put soy sauce in it.
Extra salt, I guess I could kind of see it.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not a big fan of soy sauce, so I never
Yeah.
understood it, but he would put soy sauce or teriyaki in a pinch if we were out of soy. But
Okay, like
yeah.
fair, I could
But
kind of see it.
he's also from New Orleans. So, you got to
Oh,
kind of take it with a grain of salt
yeah.
because I think he really just did anything. He'd also sometimes put Tabasco in it. I guess
That's
it
kind
just,
of like ketchup. I could see
yeah, it's
that.
kind of like ketchup, spicy ketchup,
Spicy
or
ketchup,
as the kids used to say,
bitey
bitey ketchup.
ketchup.
But it is definitely, um, it's definitely a acquired taste. But I've noticed that people from New Orleans, I mean, listen, if you eat the heads of crawfish, I'm
Eat the
not,
brown part.
yeah, like I feel like you probably really like food and you're
Yeah,
gonna have some odd tastes that I can't get down with. And that's, soy sauce on mac and cheese is one of them, but
there you go.
yeah.
Well, on that note, thank you again, Heather, for letting me interview you. It's
Thank you
been
so much for
wonderful.
having me on.
And again, viewers, head over to Bridget's Gate Press, see what they have in the works, what's up and coming, what's open right now. The Gothic Romance, which obviously is going to be one of Heather's favorite
Yeah.
submission piles to read. Go ahead and hit that up if you
Mhm.
have something that fits. And thank you again. And then
Thank you so much.
hopefully
Thank
we
you for
see each
having
other
me.
at another convention, maybe StokerCon next year.
Yeah, maybe we're
Yeah,
talking about StokerCon next
yeah.
year. Yeah.
And thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.